I have not seen a proper non-sponsored full review on this Huawei Nova 11 phone on YouTube from your favorite tech YouTubers. That changes today, because we are reviewing this Nova 11 non-Pro model, a brutally honest review after more than 30 days since it launched here. I'm not sure why your favorite tech YouTubers have yet to do a follow-up review on this phone, but the good thing about not being sponsored is that I can say whatever I want about this phone, be it good or bad. But as you've seen from the title, this is going to be mostly good because this is just the second time we're reviewing a Huawei phone after that MatePad tablet from 3 years ago. And the main reason why I can finally recommend this Nova 11 is the improving Google support. But if we're to compare this phone's spec sheet to spec sheet against its Nova 10 predecessor, there's really no difference from the chipset to the camera sensors. The only noticeable difference here is the added 500 mAh battery on the Nova 11, a slightly updated design, and a flat panel that used to be curved on the Nova 10. I guess I'm starting to see the reason why there are no reviews, simply because there's not a lot to review here. Well, except for the software. The Nova 11 is running on Harmony OS 3.0 and comes with the latest Gbox, aka Google Box. It's basically a passive app or software that delivers built-in Google mobile services to any Huawei or Android phone. And this isn't something Huawei has made in-house. It's actually made by Singapore-based developers. So you can install Gbox on your old Nova 10 or non-Google supported phone to make it seem like it supports Google services. As a user who relies on Google when it comes to my mobile and desktop needs, I surely am excited to see this alternative work 90% of the time. So basically, most of my Google apps work on my Nova 11. I have Google Drive, Gmail, YouTube, YouTube Studio, Google Photos, the Google app itself, and even Google Podcast and Google Authenticator. To install, all you really have to do is to search those Google apps on Huawei's app gallery, and it'll say if those apps run on Gbox or not. Upon opening the app for the first time, it'll run a boot up process which may happen from time to time that may add up in loading time, but once you're done with that, you'll only need to log in once to your Google account to use the other Google apps. And that's basically it. You may now enjoy your favorite Google apps on this device. It also supports auto update in the background, a feature that's actually important here because both the app gallery and pedal search require uninstalling and deleting all the data when you update an app. But since this is a workaround, there are a few catches. For starters, of all the Google apps that I have here, Google Keep is not available. It's installable as a quick web app, so you'd have to log in again to your Google account if you wish to use Google Keep. The second is that Google Authenticator just refuses to work when trying to log in. No workaround for that so far. The third is that the media controls on the notification center and picture-in-picture mode for YouTube aren't working as well. Fourth, logging into Instagram via Facebook doesn't work. I know it's not a Google app per se, but it's still an app that's on Gbox, and that's basically all the catches I've experienced so far. Most of this may seem trivial to most of you, but these are the things that I use every day, so hopefully the support gets better over time. But outside Google, Harmony OS on the Nova 11 is okay, but clunky. So the Snapdragon 778G chipset is paired with 8GB of RAM, and their pairing here is not as good as I remember. We have reviewed Xiaomi's Mi 11 Lite 5G NE, which has the same chipset and amount of storage, but felt smoother and snappier and more stable, just in terms of animations when switching to different apps. Here, you'll notice frame drops more often than you would expect. And although 5G is not supported here, I've noticed that it's easier to connect to mobile internet with other devices than this phone. I was using my prepaid Globe SIM card with good signal coverage in my area, but I simply had a hard time connecting to the internet to the point I had to take out my SIM card and put it inside a different phone since it was stormy at the time. Also, Facebook's business suite seems to have trouble syncing notifications in real time. I always have to open the app to receive my message from the app. No other app does this except for Business Suite. Additionally, before you get to use the device, its first boot up will greet you with a ton of permissions for ads and privacy. I usually don't mention this stuff, but because it was a lot, I just had to. And even when you're all booted up, there are a ton of apps that are suggested in the home screen. They're not yet installed, but they look like traps waiting for you to tap on them and install them. Sorry if I sounded like I'm ranting, but that's just my experience with Huawei's Harmony OS. It's a bit of a shame since I kinda like the look, the style, and even the fun of Huawei's software. But overall, this phone isn't geared towards hardcore gamers, given the chipset it has. But if you should know, I played Star Rail here and I had to set the graphical settings to medium to achieve 40 FPS of gameplay. But if you play games at high settings at 60 frames like The Legend of Neverland, Mobile Legends, the CPU temperature will hover between 48 to 52 degrees Celsius. But surprisingly, the surface temperature remains warm at best. It's almost as if the outer build of the phone doesn't get affected. But then again, this is more suited for casual users who do a lot of social media stuff on their phones. Which then brings me to the design. Because casual users lean toward the design more than the performance. So what I have here is the black color, and the back panel is now satin, so it's non-glossy, doesn't attract fingerprints, and keeps the phone clean regardless if you have sweaty hands. At certain angles, depending on how the light hits the back panel, you may notice some black and purple hue. And yes, this is glass, but the frame is still plastic. Not surprising, but I do appreciate the glossy chamfered edges and this rounded square frame that really feels more premium than the other phones at this price range. The build here feels more solid, more refined. It kind of says a lot about Huawei's experience in the smartphone market, and it translates here. In fact, for a large 6.7 inches phone, this one feels compact and handy. If I'm to compare it with another phone outside Huawei, it almost feels like this is a sibling of the Asus Zenfone 9. As per usual with other phones, there is no headphone jack and micro SD expansion, but the buttons here are definitely the clickiest and the most responsive buttons I have ever tested. And I like the nice red accent on the power button there. This does have dual speakers, but it's not going to impress a lot of ears in terms of bass or loudness. It's just average at best. And then you have that big camera hump with a big gold round frame that's made of plastic and metal. It actually goes really well with the Huawei's branding on the back, and I actually like it. The overall design here is clean but sophisticated and kinda luxurious to some extent. And yeah, I kinda dig it. Then you got the display. It's an OLED 6.7 inch diagonal, Full HD Plus resolution, 120 Hz refresh rate, 300 Hz touch sampling rate, and supports HDR10 but not Dolby Vision. Nevertheless, it's one of the most accurate panels I've seen by far, and it's bright as well, enough to withstand harsh sunlight. There's not a lot to say here other than it looks great. And then the cameras. If there's something the Nova 11 is good at, other than the design, it's the camera. So you have two shooters on the back. One is a 50 megapixel sensor and the other is an 8 megapixel ultrawide. And the photos you get here, especially in gray line conditions, are really great. There's plenty of detail, even with ample inner lighting present. It's kind of the typical Huawei look with images looking extra contrasty and extra sharp. There is a tendency for cameras to produce washed out shadows when high dynamic range is required, like shooting against a bright background. And as impressive as the laser autofocus is, it's actually difficult to get a shot with perfect focus. I'm not sure if it's because of the shutter lag or Huawei's post-processing, but there were images that I thought were locked in focus, but when I checked, it's either out of focus or blurred. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you should have steady hands and stay steady for a couple of seconds after hitting that shutter button, and that's not an intuitive thing for a smartphone. But switching to video, this phone is capable of recording up to 4K at 30 frames, and with decent EIS or stabilization as well. Again, it's hard to get a bad video when great lighting is present, but indoors, it manages to keep the sharpness and noise minimal without sacrificing the overall quality. Much like in photos, the dynamic range is the most challenging part for this camera as it struggles to keep the skin tones properly lit. And there's also this weird quirk where the skin tones favor the red colors, so faces would appear too red at times. But then again, that laser autofocus does some focus hunting at times. However, I do love the fact that this phone lets you continuously record a video in both 4K and 1080p when switching between the main and ultra-wide sensors. I know there is a huge downgrade in quality when going from the main to ultra-wide, but it's such a godsend to have this function available. Now you don't need to play and stop whenever you need to switch cameras. Speaking of switching, let's switch to the selfie camera. This phone is using a whopping 60 megapixel sensor for selfies. What's more, that sensor is capable of ultra-wide and can also record up to 4K 30fps with EIS. And just like the main cameras, you can switch between all three cameras while recording. If you're looking for the best vlogging phone at this price range, just in terms of the helpful functions and features for vlogging, look no further than this phone. And yes, the quality you get is outstanding and easily the best in terms of sharpness, stability, and colors, at least when it comes to the phones I've tested. The only thing lacking is HDR in selfie videos. But hey, the rest of the package is great. Oh, and the battery? The 4500 mAh may look small on paper, but the battery life I get here is really solid. I easily average 6 hours of screen time in light use, meaning lots of video streaming and web surfing, but with heavy use like playing games while mobile data is turned on, it's around 4 to 5 hours of screen time, which is still great. But of course, you have the luxury to go from 0 to 100 in just half an hour with a 66 watt charging brick. Also, I like how Huawei is showing the battery health of their phones like how Apple does with their iPhones. But Huawei takes it a notch by not only letting you learn your charging habits, but Huawei also letting you set a custom charging limit to prolong the lifespan of the battery. Now, Huawei Nova 11 isn't cheap at 24,899 pesos, but it's 2,000 peso cheaper than last year's model with nearly the same set of features. And at that price point, it gets tougher for this phone to stand out, especially when you have flagship color phones out there for less than the price of this phone. However, this phone is not for gamers. It's for most users out there who value design and camera over anything else. So despite the price tag, and despite the challenges of getting Google to run on a Huawei phone, I can finally recommend a Huawei phone in the Nova 11 if you're willing to go through all the things I've mentioned regarding getting Google apps to work, of course. And I also asked you whether 5G is important when buying a new phone, and most of you said that it's not that important. To add to that, I own an iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I still find myself switching to 4G 90% of the time simply because 5G is unreliable where I'm from. So basically, that's my 30-day review with a Nova 11. That's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel, and as always, until the next one, stay safe.